So I want to start off by saying this is going to be a bit of an irregular, and I use that sort of in air quotes, day. And part of that is because we're going to take today, we are going to study Talmud, but we're going to study Talmud specifically as part of a reflection of the shooting that happened in Pittsburgh 4 years ago. And so if you were planning on joining just sort of our normal Talmud class, and you don't want to talk about that, that's totally cool. And join us next week. We'll sort of be back on our regularly scheduled program because today is not going to be quite like that. And so my suggestion, my encouragement is just to take care of yourself, figure out what feels right for you emotionally, intentionally, how you'd like to spend your day. Just know today is going to be a little different, and yeah, we're gonna do that. I'm gonna sort of by way of introduction we're gonna learn some Torah. I'm gonna share a few stories. We're gonna reflect on community and joy and sorrow. Those are sort of the themes that we'll talk about. And in particular, we're going to talk about the shooting that happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue, the building last 4 years ago. And maybe at the end, well, if we have some extra time, we'll give people a chance to share your own stories. And so what I'm going to do is, and I'll share more context as we get along. Can everybody see this okay? We're going to have slides instead of a source sheet today. And so I want to begin, really more than anything else, with remembering the individuals who were murdered, their families, the people who were present in the building that day, the people in the neighborhood. And so I want to just start off by reading their names: Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Jerry Rabinowitz, David Rosenthal, Cecil Rosenthal, Sylvan Simon, Bernice Simon, Daniel Stein, Melvin Wax, and Irving Younger. We remember them not just for the individuals they are and the stories of who they were and their impact on community, but also the concentric circles of impact of the people who were their family members and the people who were in the room and people who were members of the three congregations and the people in the neighborhood, and certainly the Jewish world more broadly. What people may not know about Pittsburgh, you might, but people may not know that there's a lot of overlap. The community is very interconnected. People are part of more than one synagogue. And particularly in Squirrel Hill, there's a lot of interaction. And so, nobody was really a stranger in Squirrel Hill. Everybody sort of knows each other. And so I just very briefly want to share with you just a few points of my story, and then we're going to learn some text. As I said before, joy and sorrow, live together, and a theme of today's learning. And my wife and I got married. Tomorrow is our anniversary. We got married. We were in Los Angeles, but we got married at the weekend of the shooting. And as people who live in Pittsburgh, as a rabbi in Pittsburgh, that was very complicated for us. And part of what we were trying to navigate that weekend is trying to find the balance between the pain that was happening in our community and the fear and all of the things that were happening, and then trying to balance that with the sort of profound joy of our wedding. And we'll talk about this sort of tension throughout. Over the course of the weekend, the wedding was on Sunday, the shooting was on Saturday. And when we returned home, for a variety of reasons, it ended up being that I was the only clergy person who served as a pastoral presence at Congregation Beth Shalom, where I worked. And it's the largest and most central synagogue in Squirrel Hill. And it was the place that week and the weeks that followed, and particularly that first Shabbat, that hosted Tree of Life, Dor Chadash, and New Light, the three congregations who were attacked in the weeks that followed. And including that first Shabbat, we had 1,000 people that Saturday morning as we mourned our dead. And so I'm not gonna share my whole story now because we're really here to study Torah. And so I'm going to offer you two links that if you want to save for yourself for later, you should feel free. First one is a reflection. I'm putting them in the chat, and anyone who wants, maybe Shani, you can share these with people if somebody wants them and they didn't get them or they weren't here today, you can share them with them. And then I see my dear friend, Ariel Friedtanzer here, who is hiding with her screen off, which is totally fine. I was going to share, she interviewed my wife and I 2 years ago, and that video is available here. So I didn't just share it because Ariel is sitting on the call, but because I had actually thought about it in advance. And so we shared our story and our experience. And if you're interested, we spoke with Ariel about it. And so I invite you at your own pace, at your own leisure, if you're interested, to take a look at those. And then I really want to, as we shift, is share something my friend Rabbi Mark Goodman, who's now a rabbi at Congregation B'Shalom and who was in Pittsburgh with me during those years. He reminded me, he said this last year, and I sit with it every year, which is that there's no right Torah for a day like today. Even though I'm going to give you all sorts of Torah that I think is meaningful, at least to me, there isn't really any there is no right Torah. For each of us, and certainly me, is going to need something different and something ungraspable. And I don't know, for me, I struggle every year to think about what Torah feels right. What's gonna feel fitting for the moment. And every year I feel like I don't get quite there, but that's part of it because there's no Torah that's right for today. And so what we're going to share today is the stuff that keeps coming back to me, the things that keep inspiring me. And I'm going to invite you, as you think of things, to things that do inspire you, or connections or references or things that feel right to you. I invite you to put them in the chat. If something resonates, like this, as we normally do for our Talmud classes, this is an opportunity for us to learn from one another. I do have some notes, just because I have things I want to make sure to say. And on a day like today, my memory is not as good as it could be. That's the power of trauma for you. And so, yeah, we're gonna have a conversation. And then lastly, I want to say one thing. Generally my classes, and hopefully today will be no exception, there will be lots of interactivity. We'll have a chance to hear from one another. And so, and not have it be frontal, because I think that's boring and that's no good. But I just want to invite, there aren't that many of us on the call, but just to sort of be thoughtful about, how we share this space, so that anyone who wishes to say something can, that none of us are taking up too much space. We all have a story, personal connection, learning from the news, what it was like in the aftermath. Cleveland and Pittsburgh are not so far apart. And so I know that there's something there for each of us. So just sort of be thoughtful for that. Okay, that's way more introduction than I planned on, but here we are. Let's learn some Talmud here, and we're going to begin with this text from Masechet Brachot on 64a. Can I get a volunteer to read for us this text? Anybody want to read? Yeah, Jenny, please.
Sure. I guess I'm just reading the English.
Yes, I mean you can read the Aramaic if you want to, but only feel obligated to read the English.
So just the Rabbi Levi, right?
Correct.
All right. Rabbi Levi Bar Haya said, "One who leaves the synagogue and immediately enters the study hall and engages in Torah study is privileged to receive the divine presence. As it is stated, they go from strength to strength. Every one of them appears before God in Zion. Those who go from a place of prayer to a place of Torah study are privileged to receive a divine revelation in Zion."
Wonderful. Thank you. So on one level, we're talking about the story of a specific event 4 years ago, of the murder of 11 people, their friends and their families and the congregations, the story of Pittsburgh on that day. And what this text, I think, reminds us is that we're going to leave that history, that story, and we're going to shift to a moment of Torah learning, right? We're going to leave the synagogue and we're going to enter the study hall. And so spiritually, I think Rabbi Levi Bar Chia is reminding us that when we leave the synagogue moment, we were in and we're engaging in Torah now, that God's presence is still with us, right? That we're doing what God wants from us, that reflecting and studying Torah is in part of what is desired by us, and that we're given strength, right? Every one of them, they go from strength to strength. And I think that's important. And certainly for me on a day like today, I don't feel like I have all that much strength, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. And it's also a reminder that we don't, and again, this is a reminder for me as much as for anyone else, that we don't have to relive the day. You know, there are traumas in our lives of many kinds, and we don't have to relive it, but we can reflect upon it. We can study from it, and we're doing that. So let's just take a moment as we think about this power of strength. What, just as human beings, as students of Torah, as people who live in Cleveland, I mean, what have you, what gives you strength? What's something that makes you feel stable and strong? And I use these words very, very broadly defined. And feel free to unmute or to put in the chat, whatever feels right.
That we just go on, that we're able to absorb it, do our little bit of crying, and then continue. We don't dwell on it to the extent we dwell on it. We always remember. We're very good at remembering, but we're willing to jump over the hurdle and continue with our life and be made stronger by any of these incidents.
Yeah, right. Just the knowledge, the impetus to endure, to just keep going. Yeah, that's powerful. Anyone else want to share? Jackie, please. I saw you waving into the camera, so I assume that's what that meant. Hold on, let me prompt you to unmute. Maybe that'll make it easier. You're still muted.
I try to think of the individuals and the good they did while they were here, while they were able. That the fact that they were in shul doing what a Jew should do, and try to remember good things that people do in their lives.
Yeah. I think it's powerful to remember, right, all the ways that these individuals, you know, the 11 people we're remembering today, as well as lots of people we encounter who do good in ways that we see and the ways that we don't see. I know over the course of the years that followed after the shooting, I would always be learning new things about those 11 individuals, about all the things they were involved with, all the good they were doing in the community that, you know, I didn't know about. I didn't hear because I didn't overlap with that part of their lives. I think it's a good reminder for everyone we meet, all the things that they do that we don't notice, that we don't know about, that doesn't overlap with our lives, but it's still there. It's really powerful. Thank you, Jackie.
We do have a member of Rose Mallinger's family that lives in the Cleveland community. And I know they were very stricken. Sure.
Shani, do you want to add something?
Oh, I'm sorry. Someone was waving bye to me.
That's good too. Anyone else want to add something that brings you strength?
Well, I will say, I think the biggest piece is community. Just how our community came together, whether we were in Pittsburgh or not, but how all the different Jewish communities and also non-Jewish communities came together to help Pittsburgh when this happened. Yeah, community is powerful. And the way we interact with each other, both Jews and non-Jews, but within the Jewish community, beyond the Jewish community. I remember on the Friday following the shooting, right before Shabbat, I got a phone call from one of my friends who's a Muslim leader in Pittsburgh, asking if we wanted his community to make sort of a big ring around the synagogue as a way of helping make it feel safe, right? That there were people there sort of as a boundary.
And it was just a profoundly kind offer. We didn't end up, that wasn't what we wanted, but it was just a powerful willingness to put themselves into our shoes, into our community. It was really powerful. As I shared before, Alana and I got married the weekend, and our anniversary on the English calendar is tomorrow, but it's also our Jewish anniversary is on the 19th of Cheshvan, which is not for another 2.5 weeks or so. And one of the things is sort of the reason why we talk about joy and sorrow, Alana and I, is that as we tried to grapple with what was happening, Alana's sister, Rebecca, started to give us this language of joy and sorrow to guide us through. And these things, they live together, exist together. This language became our mantra. And I taught this last time we met at the very end of our last session, however long ago in September that was, this text from Ketubot. And this, when we right before we processed at our wedding, Rabbi Cheryl Peretz, who was one of our two officiants, she had shared this with me the night before and shared it at the wedding, which was that the sages teach one reroutes a funeral procession for a burial of a corpse to yield before a wedding procession of a bride, which is to say the Gemara gives a scenario of you have these two processions. I always imagine it like the roads are like an X, it's like a T intersection kind of thing, or whatever, a plus shaped intersection. And they're going and they sort of meet in the middle, and they're like trying to figure out who goes first. And the rabbis remind us that a wedding procession takes precedence, that the funeral procession yields. And I think for me, one of the reasons, and again, we talked about this a few weeks ago, why this I think is so powerful is as a reminder that we choose life, that we honor life. That isn't to say that death doesn't matter, because it certainly does, and that it deserves to be honored. But that we honor life, we take precedence in life. The Torah says, right, you shall live by them and not die by them, right, in terms of the mitzvot. But it also teaches us that these things are an intersection, right, that these moments, these things, real life is when these things intersect. And one of the ways that this shows up in Jewish life is at a wedding, when we smash a glass at the end of the ceremony, where we talk about these joyous moments that the world is still broken. And this Talmud from Masechet Brachot on 30b is actually one of the stories, there are quite a few, in which we start to get the source for the smashing of the glass at a wedding. Can I get a volunteer to read this text? Anybody want to read?
I'll read.
Jackie, is that you?
Yeah.
Please.
On a similar note, the Gemara relates, Mar, son of Ravina, made a wedding feast for his son, and he saw the sages, who were excessively joyous. He brought a valuable cup worth 400 zuz and broke it before them, and they became sad. The Gemara also relates, Rav Ashi made a wedding feast for his son, and he saw the sages, who were excessively joyous. He brought a cup of extremely valuable white glass and broke it before them, and they became sad.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, so this is one of the sources, or really two sources. It comes from, the two stories come next to each other, but one of the many sources of the smashing of the glass before at the end of a wedding. And you can see that this tension between joyous moments and sad moments live together, right? They're not, right? We don't live in one. We as Jewish people don't like to live in one emotional state. We like to live in more than one at a time. Yeah, Nelson.
I don't understand these stories. I don't understand why they became sad when he broke the glass. But also at a wedding, my recollection is when the glass is broken, that's a time when everybody exclaims joy. It's a symbol that you're about to enter into your regular life.
Yeah, so I think there are other stories in which they are more explicit, and maybe next time I'll pull one of those, where it's more explicit of saying this is excessive joy. right? So on Masechet Brachot, on the same page, part of the context is talking about excessive joy, and that, you know, like Rambam's Benoni, that there's a desire for sort of mediated feelings, right? Not feeling the extreme of anything, not excessive sadness nor excessive joy. And so I think that is part of what's sort of here, and you can see excessive joy here is that, and here is the Aramaic badchi tuva. But I think one of the ways I've understood and is often framed the smashing of a glass, although I really like what you just said, right? Which is like, okay, now like the world's broken, like there's this loud thing, and now go on the rest of your life. I love that framing. Traditionally, it's often marked in terms of the world is still broken, and we don't forget that even amidst our joy, which I think is part of what's showing up here. And I think for Alana and I, it was certainly the opposite, which is that we needed to remember that there was joy amidst the brokenness, and so I think that part of what we learn from this text is that it's not really about an either or. It's about holding more than one thing at a time. I know that's certainly my takeaway. I'd be open. I'd love to hear what other people think about this text and what it reflects for you.
I think, Rabbi, it's kind of enigmatic because it begs the question, what is excessive joy? Because it doesn't really define it.
True.
And it occurs to me that, at least at many weddings I've attended, the breaking of the glass is sort of like that's when everybody gets to say Mazel Tov and really start celebrating, so to speak. So we may think of it as, well, the temple is still destroyed, so we break a glass. Or the world, or as you said, the world is not fully repaired, if you will, so we break a glass. But in the actual moment, at least, maybe it wasn't the case for Mar, son of Rabino or Rav Ashi, but at least in the United States of America in the 21st century of the Common Era, I think for a lot of people, that's just the beginning of really celebrating. It's the end of the ceremony. The glass is broken. Everybody shouts Mazel Tov, and we're ready to start.
Right. Everybody go to the hora, right, to do the dancing.
Yeah. So that's a rather different response to what seems to be a sort of enigmatic piece of Gemara anyway, because what is it? Ironically, maybe we're engaged in excessive joy. I don't know. But what is excessive joy?
Yeah, so you ask a bunch of really interesting questions. First is, right, how do we define terms here? What is excessive joy referring to? And by the way, by contrast, then, what does excessive sadness look like, right, as we are defining terms? And I'm not going to offer an answer because I don't know the answer. I think, one of the languages, one of the phrases we often talk about in terms of the Jewish people is, right, this is sort of yearning, that we're always yearning for something that we don't have yet. And I don't mean it in a selfish way, but in the sense that that the world is not yet what it could be. And we're yearning for that world that we have. That's sort of part of the sort of messianic language that is used for this world that isn't here now, that could be. And so I think that there is this desire by the rabbis, and again, maybe we'll do a real study and we'll pull out a bunch of these stories for us to unpack together as a group. But that this there's a desire, it seems like, from the rabbis to sort of let's keep an even keel, right? Let's not get too much of any one feeling. Let's make sure we stick in the middle where we get a taste of everything. So I think it's a really good, interesting question about how do we define excessive joy, and it makes me think of the language. It shows up in a couple of places, and I think including on high holidays, where we talk about now I'm not going to remember the phrase. Sort of this like a light head, I think is how it's phrased in the Talmud and then the other texts, right? So that we're sort of not focused on the important things that we're doing at the moment. Our mind is elsewhere. That our sort of mind has wandered. And I think the idea is that we want to stay focused on what we're actually doing here, what we're really doing, So I don't know. It's an interesting question. The second thing I want to pull out from what you said, which I thought was fascinating, is then the reflective question about our own actions. Perhaps we as moderns aren't actually spending enough time creating balance and emotions, but instead are really focusing purely on joy, which again, we would think to ourselves, not such a bad thing. And I would say, as Americans, I'll speak for myself, I won't speak for anyone else. As an American, our inclination does seem to be that we don't want to focus on the bad things. We don't want to focus on the negative things, or I guess depending on which are on the politics of the day, you know, we're only focusing on the bad things. But that we really do like to sort of keep distracted, keep on the happy things, you know, lots of candy and sugary foods, as it were. It's an interest. They're good questions, none of which I have answers to. Ron.
Also, I think you alluded to this and I left it out, but what's bringing them down or causing some sadness is the breaking of something valuable, either a cup worth 400 zuz, or I guess this is an interpolation by Steinsaltz, but extremely valuable white glass. And then again, ironically, we're usually breaking a flashbulb wrapped in a napkin. I mean, maybe there's an actual cup in there and not a flashbulb, but a lot of times, as I understand, the reason why people are using a flashbulb is it's easier to break. You step on a well-built glass, you might not break it, but a flashbulb you'll break.
Yeah. I mean, certainly it's very common in the U.S. or weddings I've seen where they have a light bulb instead of.
And the irony is that's nothing valuable at all. I mean, that's you know, a $2 to $4 item, so to speak.
Right, and I've seen other customs in which people break plates. Some of the other stories refer to plates. But yeah, right. All the more so, right? We're actually not even breaking anything. We're symbolizing the symbol on some level, right? We're already a couple of steps removed. That's a really wonderful observation. Ron, hold on. Ron, I saw Nelson and then Sheila.
Oh, that's right.
All right. I know somebody else on this call will know where this is, but it's somewhere in Torah or Talmud about everything being in moderation, not to the right, not to the left. And I think the exception is humility. I don't know if there is another exception, but that's the one that sticks in my mind. And now, not so seriously, I always thought the breaking of the glass by the man was his last chance to put his foot down in the marriage.
Yeah, that's only a manifestation of the patriarchy. I don't think there's any real truth to that. I'll tell you this: I never say that at a wedding because I find it kind of gross. But yeah, I think that yeah. I think that's well put. Nelson, and then Sheila.
Everybody has said what I wanted to say, but I do want to comment about flashbulbs. When I was a young man, they were common and inexpensive. Today, they're probably museum items.
Oh, those actual light bulbs. Yeah, that's probably true. Sheila.
Well, again, what I was going to really say, what David said, point being practicality. Jews are always practical. And this is a story I can never forget. Somebody in town was marrying somebody in Ireland, an Irish guy, and he was going, I don't know where the wedding was actually, but he was going to, he's very proud, he was going to go to the Waterford factory and buy a glass to break. And they informed him, because it's cheap. We're in Ireland, we can get it for very little. And they tried to explain to him, yeah, but it'll be very hard to break. And you could actually hurt your foot. So it's funny, the joy and the sadness, we don't want to have somebody get hurt at a moment of joy. If you think, you can look at it that way. But this is very unusual, it seems to me, for a Jewish attitude to spend so much on a valuable cup. You want to spend it on the Kiddush cup, fine, but something that is going to break it doesn't sound so Jewish.
Yeah, so I want to say two things. One is I want to go back to what Ron was saying before. You're talking about is Hilchot Deot from the Rambam, which talks about no extremes to either side. It's in the beginning of the Mishnah Torah. That's what I was going to say, and I couldn't remember what it was in the moment. So Hilchot Deot, which is fantastic, wonderful Torah, worth learning. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, Sheila, I want to point out something. You make a point about what we do, right, which is we are intentionally choosing an item that we know is going to be broken. And we make choices as a result. We don't want somebody to get hurt. We want it to be easy to break. We want it to be a light bulb, whatever. But I want to make an important distinction about what's happening in this text. Because in this text, it's not happening on purpose. Mar and Rav Ashi are having an emotional reaction in the moment. And their choice in the moment is to break a glass. Right? It's about
excessive. The word excessive.
Right. Well, in the sense that people are having excessive joy. Maybe we can imagine, right? Maybe they're drinking heavily. They're laughing too much, right? In the sense that they're losing the moment, right? And in order to capture their attention, they're breaking the glass or the plate or whatever the item is, right? In this case, they're both cups, but in other stories, they're also plates, right? It's to shock them out of their revelry to pay attention. And there are lots of things in the tradition that are like that, right? So we blow the shofar, I think, for that purpose, right? To bring people's attention to the moment, right? Don't get lost in all the things. Focus on what we're actually doing.
Yeah, but that's okay. I have no objection to that. My problem is that they are choosing to break something extremely valuable when the money can be used for something. I always think, as you say, to choose life, to choose things that will continue. And here, you can have the same shock value with something that's all right, I mean, I agree that a light bulb, I remember we used to say a light bulb is not very glamorous, but it was just that it was easy. And I mean, to wit, today people take the glass and they make it into mezuzahs and things like that.
We have one of those, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember some couple got hysterical. Michael had to go run around because the glass disappeared and he knew that it was going to be used for a mezuzah, so he had to go around and get people to find the glass that was broken, which, ordinarily you would just throw out.
Yeah, so I think it's
the excessive, I don't find it a Jewish value. I understand what you're saying. It could be loud, but it doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'll say two things, and then I want us to move on. One is, how much greater of a point by using something expensive when it could have used something cheap? How much that may not jive with you. That's cool, but I think that is in part, at least in the Gemara's telling of this story, it's like not only did he make this loud noise, he did it with something that of high value. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I want to also think when we think over the course of time, we're talking about these stories of people doing a thing and how that tradition became to what we have now. There are lots of small moments, customs and traditions that happened in the middle, right? That we have 1,800 years between these reactions to excessive joy and the fact that we're using a light bulb, right? There's 1,800 years between those moments. I'm willing to guess that Mar and Rav Ashi are not imagining, right? By the way, these are not happening during the ceremony. These are happening in the party. That they could never imagine that we would fold that into a wedding ceremony now, right? So that also reminds us of how customs change over time, how we evolve the way we do things. And Sheila, I think your points are well made, right? It feels wasteful to use this, to use something expensive when it could be something inexpensive. The resources, maybe even to buy it, we could be using with tzedakah or something else. I certainly hear those, and I think points are well made. I do want to.
We do the same thing at a funeral, where we don't necessarily tear our best clothes. We pick something that isn't our best clothes.
Nice. That is a great example, right on the other side. right? We don't necessarily take our most expensive shirt and tear it. We, you know, often we have these little ribbons that we use today.
But there are people, I know people who think, oh, well, they're not going to tear it so much, and who wear their best suit. Or, you know, in other words, they're showing off because they're on full view.
Yeah, well, I think sort of, I think it is good, and certainly in part of our focus here is to remember that we want to see the best in one another, right? So I hear what you're saying, certainly a possibility, but if we think about the best in one another, we might come with a different perspective. I want to shift sort of back to this sort of tension between joy and sorrow. You might recognize this text from the Birkat Hamazon from Psalms. We say it for Shabbat and holidays, right? It's part of Shir Hamalot, Psalm 126. Hazorim bedima barina yiktsoru, right? They who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. And I'll just share that the name of our daughter, the one we chose, is Rina, in particular because of this joyous song as part of what we wanted to reflect on. And then the second, Haloch yelech uvacho nose meshech hazara bo yavo verina nose alumota, right? Though the person goes on weeping, carrying this bag of seeds, they will come back with songs of joy, carrying sheaves, right? That even though something might begin in sadness, might end, in fact, in joy. And again, we start to see that these two things, joy and sorrow, start to show up together over and over again. And as this week's Parsha is Parshat Noach, we have this just a great example of this showing up again, or at least I found it just sort of very timely. We have in the story this sort of when did the water burst forth? In the second month on the 17th day of the month, which we might ask, well, when is that second month, right? Are we counting with Rosh Hashanah as the first month, or are we counting as Nisan as the first month? And Rashi tells us that the second month refers to, according to Rabbi Eliezer in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, that this is the month of Mar Cheshvan, the month we're in now. I like to call it Cheshvan. I don't need extra bitterness attached to the month. But as we think about this moment of, certainly the shooting happening on the 18th of Cheshvan, this moment of these overwhelming floodgates. And for me, I always find this imagery of floodgates. This is the language you use around tears, right? We were just talking about tears in Psalm 126, right? We often use the language of the floodgates opened, right? And that's when people are really crying. And I think about how, these floodgates, these sort of physical and metaphysical and spiritual and emotional, and in this case, sort of these floodgates of water, there's some alignment that's happening. And I think Cheshvan, not that sort of this kind of thing would happen dafka in Cheshvan, but the fact that it did happen in Cheshvan gives us an opportunity to draw meaning from it. And I think one of the lessons that I draw from this time is the sort of this language of the outflow of emotion. And in particular, and this is going to take us to our penultimate Talmud text for the day. I know normally we sort of like dig into one text and we're sort of bouncing around today, is that the kind of outflow, the floodgates of emotion that we have, dealing with it is not something we can truly do alone, that it's something we do with others. And I know for me, when I look back at the last 4 years, these are not my own navigating of that time and then the work that I was doing is not something I could have done alone without my wife Alana with me. And in the years since, her support is just absolutely essential. I remember, I was at the synagogue, basically all day long, on and off the phone, meeting with people, all sorts of things, and I didn't think we were going to have time to do any laundry, so I sent Alana out, who graciously went and bought me more button-down shirts so that I could just keep going. I feel so literally as if she helped stand me up so that I could be there for the community. And I definitely could not have done it without her. Just incredible. And sort of with that in mind, I think about, and these are all texts of Talmud that hopefully we'll revisit as part of our class and really dig into, is this one from Masechet Brachot as well. I'd love for somebody who hasn't read yet to read this story for us. It's one of my favorites. Anybody who hasn't read yet want to take a
I'll read if you like.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
The Gemara continues to address the issue of suffering and affliction. Rabbi Yochanan's student, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, fell ill. Rabbi Yochanan entered to visit him and said to him, "Is your suffering dear to you? Do you desire to be ill and afflicted?" Rabbi Chia said to him, "I welcome neither this suffering nor its reward, as one who welcomes this suffering with love is rewarded." Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Give me your hand." Rabbi Chia bar Abba gave him his hand, and Rabbi Yochanan stood him up and restored him to health.
All right, let me pause you there for a second, David. All right, I'm just going to review the beats of this story, right? So Rabbi Chia bar Abba falls ill, and his teacher, Rabbi Yochanan, comes to visit him. And this whole section from Masechet Brachot is about suffering. And it says, "Is your suffering dear to you?" Which is part of the conversation happening elsewhere in the Gemara, right? Meaning, say, are you happy with the suffering? There's a whole conversation like, is suffering good? Do we want to suffer? Does that mean we're not going to suffer in the world to come? Like all sorts of stuff like that. And Rabbi Chia says, I don't want suffering. I don't want the reward that might come from it, which is, again, part of the broader conversation. And Rabbi Yochanan reaches out his hand and brings him back to health, which, again, we could ask all sorts of questions. Like, what does that even mean? Like, what kind of healing is that? You know, is it like a high five, like a healing high five? Like, I have so many questions about what Rabbi Yochanan is doing. But here we have the story. Rabbi Chia bar Abba falls ill. Rabbi Yochanan comes to visit and then is restored. Rabbi Chia is restored to health. All right, David, keep going. You're right here, similarly.
Similarly, Rabbi Yochanan fell ill. Rabbi Chanina entered to visit him and said to him, "Is your suffering dear to you?" Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "I welcome neither this suffering nor its reward." Rabbi Chanina, I think needs to scroll.
No, go to the right.
Go to the right. Oh, okay. Rabbi Chanina said to him, his hand.
Sorry. It says Rabbi Chanina said to him, "Give me your hand." He gave him his hand.
Okay. Yeah, that's the part I couldn't see on my screen. Him his hand, and Rabbi Chanina stood him up and restored him to health.
All right, pause.
Mara asked.
Wait, pause, David. Right, so now we have the second part of the story, right? So Rabbi Yochanan is the one who falls ill this time. A different person, Rabbi Chanina, comes to visit, asks the same question. Are you happy to be suffering? What's your relationship suffering here? I don't want any of it, Rabbi Yochanan says. Rabbi Chanina reaches out his hand. We've seen this before. And Rabbi Yochanan is restored to health. Now, here's a question that Gemara is going to ask that none of us might have asked. All right, David, read it.
Why did Rabbi Yochanan wait for Rabbi Chanina to restore him to health? If he was able to heal his student, let Rabbi Yochanan stand himself up. The Gemara answers, they say a prisoner cannot generally free himself from prison, but depends on others to release him from his, and I can't see the last word.
The word is shackles.
Shackles.
Right? So here the Gemara asks a question. When Rabbi Yochanan was able to heal Rabbi Chia bar Abba, and Rabbi Chanina was able to heal Rabbi Yochanan, how come Rabbi Yochanan couldn't heal himself? And first of all, that's a very interesting relationship to how illness works. I'm not sure that I would have framed it that way. But the framing here, the Gemara gives, is that a person can't heal themselves, right? A prisoner can't free themselves. Yeah, Sheila, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, you need support. We always say that if, that someone is praying for you, the effect of someone else's prayer, that someone is thinking of you. First of all, okay, somebody wants me to be alive. What you're saying basically, hey, somebody wants me to be alive, I'll try it.
Yeah.
You want to know that you're wanted.
Right, that there is something about the knowing that other people care that has a role here. Yeah, Nelson.
Well, we say, we're blind to our own faults. You can't morally heal yourself.
Mm.
It takes somebody else to help.
Yeah.
I have a long interesting story about the shooting. I'm reluctant to tell it because the role I play in it, but let me tell it anyway. So I go to synagogue here in South Florida, and it's a Shabbat after the shooting.
I'm sorry, let me pause you, Nelson, before you get into it. You said it was a long story, and I want to be thoughtful of our time, and I have one more text I want to teach. So I'm happy for you to share it. Just be really thoughtful of time.
Okay. I'll speed up. I'll speed talk. And it was the week after, the Shabbat after, and there was a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah at synagogue, and the sanctuary was jammed with people celebrating. The rabbi, the custom in Cleveland, whenever there was something terrible happened, like in Israel, is the rabbi would tell everybody at the time of saying Kaddish, the whole congregation should stand and say Kaddish. But our rabbi instead called upon people individually to talk about why they were saying Kaddish, which is the normal custom there. And it was being a large congregation, extra large attendance. It took a very long time. And it just happened I was sitting at the end when he called me, so I had listened to a lot of people. And I stood up and said that I was standing in memory of the people who had been killed. And I invited everybody else to do that. And the whole congregation stood up. And afterwards, several people commented to me that was really important to them. And somehow uniting us was important. And it was part of the healing in Florida for what happened in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, your story is a great example of what's here, which is sometimes we can't see the things right in front of us, that we need someone else to show it to us. We need someone else to pull us out of that thing that we're experiencing. And, you know, we are not alone. And that comes both as individuals who need support, and then also as individuals who can offer support, right? That we have to do this together. And that sense of unity is such a big piece, such a big piece of it.
I think, Rabbi, maybe the other way of looking at that might be to look at the question the Gemara is asking, because they could have said, I think they could have said, well, it's because it wasn't really Rabbi Yochanan. You know, the healing comes from God, not from Rabbi Yochanan being a magician. But they don't say that. What they kind of imply is sort of where I think where Sheila was going, is that you need somebody else, and that's the way God works the healing.
It's clear, I think, from all of this that, right, relationships, there's such an important piece of this, right? The connections we have with other humans. I think that's exactly right. Thank you. We'll come to the end here as we remember what happened. Is this fascinating text from Moed Katan. Now, after a death, we gather and we eulogize the dead. And in the ancient world, there were actually professionals who were eulogizers. And Moed Katan, which is focused around death, has this wonderful text. I think it's wonderful. But a certain eulogizer opened a eulogy for another person with the following words: Simcha lutuga nepacha sason v'agon nidbaku. Happiness has been turned into sorrow. Joy and suffering have become joined together. It's once again this tension between joy and sorrow. In this case, we've taken the joy of life turned into the sorrow of death. And here we see that the verb that's being used is nidbaku from the root dalet bet kuf. And this root is often translated as cleave, to connect, right? We use this word when we talk about romantic partners being connected, that they cleave to one another. That's part of the language used when Sarah dies, right, is that Isaac cleaves to his wife instead of his mother. We use this language when we talk about cleaving ourselves to God. In Hasidic texts, we use the word devekut, right, of cleaving ourselves, connecting to God. For me, the takeaway is that joy and sorrow, this interconnection between these emotional states, is not just a manifestation of my own experiences, but a part of what the universe is offering. It's part of this interconnectivity of emotions and feelings and experiences. And since we have been talking predominantly about the horrible tragedy in Pittsburgh and Squirrel Hill, just end with a really joyous photo of me and my wife on our wedding, just during our hora. Just, we were having a blast. And because part of life is remembering that both of these things exist. And so I'll take this opportunity to thank all of you for your time and your willingness to sort of go off script this week. And certainly invite you back next week as we sort of return to our more standard unpacking of a Talmud text. And then I appreciate and I relay my appreciation to all of you as we process, you let me process this with you this year. I know this day is particularly hard for me and my family and for the community. And so as Shani made reference earlier, and this is where I was going to conclude, which is I'm coming to visit you in just about a month and a half or so in mid-December, 16th through 18th. And so I want to encourage you to be around. I don't know what that looks like. Shani will send out the information when it exists, and we'll make sure that people know about it. So be sure to be around. I'll be around all weekend, and let people know, and we'll study Torah together. It'll be right around Hanukkah. We'll talk about Hanukkah, and it should be a total blast. And thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time to be with me on this week to learn to text together. And I wish all of you a wonderful week, a good Shabbos. Shani, since you're here, do you want to share any shul announcements that are relevant?
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Here.
So I don't have anything else really new. First, my name's Shani.
Shani, you can plug tonight's class.
We do have a great class happening this evening. Jerry Isaac Shapiro will be our Spotlight Series educator. It's starting tonight, I want to say 7 o'clock. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ron.
No, I think, is it 7 or 7:30?
I think it's 7:30 to 9.
There you go. I've had a lot going on. So you guys in here, I just got over
Yes, it's
COVID.
7:30 to 9.
Lots of crazy things, but all is good. But yes, and then next weekend, if you haven't registered yet, Weingold Weekend with Andrew Porwancher coming in. It's a Jewish American Promise. It's going to be a wonderful weekend with all about Judaism and American history and how it all connects and intertwines. So I recommend that you participate. It's all free except for the Friday Shabbat dinner. But we want you to join us. It's going to be a fabulous weekend.
Wonderful.
I don't want anybody to do this because it conflicts with tonight's class, but there's a lecture at John Carroll tonight about choose life. It's 7.
That will be on tomorrow. There is a recording, I think, of it a day or two later, if I'm not mistaken, Ron.
Wonderful. David, I heard you were going to say something as well. No? Okay. Well, have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next week at noon. And I'll see you all or some of you in December in person. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Be well, everyone.
You too.
Bye.